Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the conference so far. We'd like to welcome you to the Affiliate Leadership Training Summit and Human Relations Conference. This is the new IAFF Nutrition Campaign Workshop, and we will be giving you some great nutrition information throughout the workshop today as well. So just to give you a heads up, this workshop is being live streamed on our Facebook page and also on the YouTube channel, and it will be available for viewing later on. My name is Courtney Benedict, and this is Lisa Desolé from Real Life Nutrition. I will let Lisa give you a little bit more about her background, what she incorporates into her presentation, and her ties to the fire service once she gets into her presentation. So I want to give you a little bit about my background and why I'm here talking to you about nutrition today. I work at the IAFF headquarters in Washington, D.C. I am a health and safety specialist and have been there for over 14 years, where I have been working on managing our fire prevention grants and programs that have been developed from these grants, along with the Fireground Survival Program, and then now helping out with the new nutrition campaign. I have also been an athlete my entire life, having just competed at the Ironman World Championships this past October. So I have a deep passion for nutrition and wellness, and I also have a deep understanding for the importance of feeding our body properly and how that works for energy, work, life, and performance. So we are very excited to be here today. We're launching this great new nutrition campaign which supports firefighter health, safety, and wellness, and we will get started. For today, we will go over the importance of nutrition for firefighters. Healthy nutrition is an important part of leading a healthy lifestyle and reducing risk of chronic disease. We'll be covering the IAFF philosophy behind our nutrition campaign, which includes Eat for Health, Eat for Life, and Eat for Real. Functional nutrition, which is the importance of considering every aspect of one's health, diet, and overall lifestyle with nutrition recommendations. Lisa will go over macronutrients and how to eat for body type, as well as cover portion sizes. And then I will take you through a fun activity where we'll be looking at some nutrition facts, looking at nutrition label, at some popular dishes at some common restaurants, and go over what to look at with ingredients and that sort of thing. And then finally, we'll go into great detail about what this new nutrition campaign entails, as well as give you some information about some exciting challenges that we'll be running throughout the year. So first, let's start with the importance of nutrition for firefighters. About half of all American adults have one or more chronic disease. Cardiac and occupational health issues now account for approximately 50% of firefighter deaths annually, with cancer and heart disease being the leading cause of death for firefighters. So the risks are very high, and the connection between chronic and preventable disease associated with poor nutrition and obesity are well documented. So good nutrition is key to a healthy life. Well, what does that mean? When we talk about good, healthy nutrition, we're talking about real, whole food, nutrient-dense foods. When we're looking at how this works with our bodies, with the whole, real, nutrient-dense foods, we want to help prevent some of these chronic diseases. So these modifiable risk factors can be improved with lifestyle and diet. There are some risk factors that are not modifiable, which is our age and genetics. And then there are many risk factors that are modifiable, which include blood pressure, body composition, our blood and glucose metabolism. And those can all be changed with lifestyle changes such as good sound nutrition and exercise. So the fire service obviously presents a unique culture, which presents opportunities for dietary modifications, and we'll be covering some of these in our presentation today. So what is the IAFF nutrition campaign? In an effort to reduce preventable deaths and diseases, this campaign brings awareness to the importance of nutrition and the role in firefighter health. What we'd like to do with this campaign is engage members in creating and maintaining healthy eating habits that support firefighter training, work demands, fitness goals, and long-term health. So the concept underlying this is eat for health, eat for life, eat for real. I'm just going to go touch upon this real briefly, and then Lisa will go over it in great detail within her presentation. So Eat for Health equips members to make choices that protect their long-term health and prevent disease. There are research-based recommendations that we'll be using and guide all of you through making the connection between dietary choices and health status. Eat for life. The physical, emotional, and mental demands of a career in the fire service are tedious. So there are recent studies that show that what we eat does not only affect our physical health, but also our mental health and well-being. Quality nutrition practices that support balance at work and home are very essential. So it's very important to learn to feed our bodies to perform well under strenuous conditions. This campaign will provide information to support training, fitness goals, and recovery both on and off duty. And then finally, Eat for Real. Eat for Real is thinking about what you're putting in your bodies. There's no one approach, no one-size-fits-all approach to nutrition. There's over 100 different dietary theories, and we know that works for one person might not work for another. One person's food might be another person's poison. So within this campaign, you'll notice that we don't support just one way of eating. We try to give you information to make choices based on your lifestyle, based on your goals, and that way you can choose what works best for you. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lisa. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. So I would ask you to go ahead and take out your smartphones. Good chance to make sure that it is on silent. And if you are joining us live, you can also participate in this. So I've given you a number to send a text to. The number is 22333. And in the text, I just want you to put the code that's there. It's Lisa Desilets 792. And once you've entered that, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. You should get an auto reply. And I like doing this because big picture, the whole purpose of this campaign is to support you. This is about you. This is about your life. This is about your career, your health. And so hearing from you, hearing what's important to you is really important to me and important to the IAFF. So the first question it poses to you is, what one word can describe your current eating habits? And if you're having a hard time narrowing it down to one word, you might put a hyphen between those two words. But just one word that would describe your current eating habits. And these pop up real time, so I'm seeing some interesting words. Words like inconsistent, poor, bad, adequate, good, inconsistent, erratic, stress, snacking, sporadic. In general, what I see when I get feedback about this is there tends to be more negative adjectives than positive. And so that tells me that maybe there's opportunity to learn some things, but really opportunity to apply some things. So a little bit about me. This is my family. It was taken because of that amazing mustache. That was during No Shave November. So the guy on the right is my husband, Phil. He's a captain with Boise Firefighters, Local 149. He's been a firefighter for, between his volunteer service and now full-time, the better part of 18 years, so our entire marriage. And I cannot speak highly enough of the benefits the fire service has provided our family. It's amazing. This career is amazing. I cannot imagine him doing anything other than being a firefighter. But I also see the toll that this line of work takes on him. I've seen it in his body. I've seen it in his mental state at different times, his response to stress. And there's no arguing with this. We know this. That's why the IAFF puts so much effort into supporting you, supporting all aspects of your career. And now we're talking about food. Why is that so important? Well, for me personally, as a health and wellness professional, I understand the long-term ramifications of a life in the fire service. If you don't prioritize your health, then you're not setting yourself up for success to enjoy a long, happy, and healthy career. And that guy, he has 2 daughters that I know he wants to walk down the aisle one day. And our son, he wants to be able to play ball with his grandkids. And selfishly, I want to enjoy a happy retirement for a long time that he's worked so hard for. So that is the driving force behind why I do what I do. And what you'll notice is it's a little different than a traditional approach to nutrition. So my background is not in dietetics. I am not a registered dietitian. I'm a certified sports nutritionist. So I like to take the approach that you are tactical occupational athletes. You should train that way. Your work demands you to be that way. You know, when you're responding to a fire in a high rise, it's really taxing on your body, and it's a different type of tax than if you're lifting a 400-pound patient and you're expected to be dynamic. So why don't we start feeding ourselves this way? So raise your hand, show of hands, if you've ever said this to yourself: I need to eat better. If your hand is not raised, you are the minority. I see across the room it's pretty unanimous. I think all of us at some point have felt, gosh, I need to eat better. But living in the information age, there's no lack of resources. There's no lack of someone telling us how we're supposed to eat. We know more about the body, we know more about food and nutrition than we ever have in the history of human existence. So why aren't we healthier? Well, my opinion is that it's not about information, it's about application of that information. So the more information that we get, we create this bigger gap between what we know and what we should do. So no longer is it, gosh, I should do these 5 things to make myself healthier. Now it feels like there's 75 things that we should do to be healthier. So that gap widens. And the purpose of this campaign, the purpose of my presentation today, is to give you some strategies that you can actually apply to start doing and sharing with your members, sharing with your crew, to decrease that gap. Let's put it into action. So when we talk about functional nutrition, anybody heard the term functional fitness before? Hopefully this is not a new term. It's a term that's being used with peer fitness trainers as well. So the idea of functional fitness is really, there's basic body mechanics, there's basic movements that every human body needs to be able to do. For example, everyone needs to squat. What it looks like for you might be different than the person next to you. Why do we all need to squat? It's not to load up a heavy barbell, though that feels really good. It's actually because we all use toilets. So we want to make sure that our knees are tracking the way that we should. Everybody needs to deadlift and be able to hinge appropriately at their hips, because we all have to pick stuff up off the ground. Particularly in your line of work, you're picking up a lot of things. Sometimes it's a lift assist. And then we all need to be able to push overhead, have good shoulder mobility so that you can do your job and you can function well. So if we take this same lens, functional fitness, and apply that now functional nutrition, how do you eat in a way that supports your life, your body, and the work that's put on you? And that's where we came up with this idea of functional nutrition. Everybody needs to follow certain practices when it comes to good nutrition, but what that looks like for you might be different than what it looks like for the guy next to you or the gal next to you. So when we talk about functional nutrition, that's where we introduce this idea of eat for health, eat for life, and eat for real. So eat for health, we all know, we've been hearing this research for many years, that there are a lot of risk factors that come with your line of work. But are there other risk factors that you're adding in by choice? So when we choose foods that we know are going to fuel us better, we can counteract some of those risk factors that are modifiable, but then also give us a little bit of insulation for some of those things that are not modifiable. For life, well, your life in the fire service is unique, and no one understands that better than a firefighter. And I have a little bit of insider information, insider perspective on what those demands are. So supporting your life both on duty, but then also recognizing you have a life outside of the station, and how do we support you in that environment as well. And then for real, anybody ever been on a strict diet plan before? I see a few hands go up. How'd that work out for you? Not so good. Oh, I'm going to do this great, awesome challenge, and I'm going to really restrict my food for the next 30 days, and then day 31 comes, and it's like, Everything's on the table and in your mouth. So I get this as I call myself a recovered bodybuilder, having done plenty of strict diets. Nobody likes that. It's tough. It's tough to sustain. So really this comes down to sustainable habits, a sustainable way of eating that supports your health and your life, but also allows you to enjoy it, because I love food. I love food. And it should taste good, and I want to enjoy it. And I want you to be able to enjoy it as well. So to simplify this, we could really hone this into 2 simple questions. When you're thinking about what you should eat, just ask yourself, will it help me? And do I like it? And we'll dive into what this looks like in more detail. But if really, instead of, is this good for me, is this bad for me, as Courtney explained, what might be good food for one person could be poison for another. So, will it help me? And do I like it? Pretty simple. So what does that look like? Well, I'm asking you to start changing your perspective about food, okay? So when I mean change your perspective, it's not now about sorting, is this good, is this bad? We're not demonizing food or any specific food group or any specific type of group. We're just getting really clear on, in this moment right now, do I need this and do I like it? Sometimes that might look like grilled chicken, some brown rice, a nice salad. Other times, it might look like a bacon guacamole cheeseburger, which is my favorite. So hopefully that piqued your interest a little bit. So why do we talk about this? Well, it's no surprise the health risks that are associated with the fire service. You're definitely exposed to a lot of toxins. That's not something that you can change or that's going to go away anytime soon. There's some sedentary aspects of lifestyle in the firehouse depending on your shift, depending on your call volume. There's a lot of stress, and cortisol is a killer. Oh man, is it a killer. And then of course you have interrupted sleep. With all of these things, the common problems that we're seeing arise in the research and the risk factors associated with firefighters, not to be all doom and gloom, but just to get really clear. We know behavioral health, we know cancer, we know depression, diabetes, heart disease, hormone dysfunction, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, poor sleep, thyroid dysfunction. All of this to say that if you are not being intentional about this, the cards are pretty stacked against you. So instead of allowing your food choices to just be hanging out in the back of your head, like, I'm hungry, what should I eat now? You need to bring it to the forefront and start putting some attention to this. Because if you don't do it, no one's gonna do it for you. And there are a lot of people in your life that love you, and they want to see you live a long and happy life for many years after you retire, but they can't do this for you. They can't do this for you. So, pretty simply, putting it simply, food choices matter. If we look at a donut compared to a chicken breast, calorically they're the same, roughly 300 calories. But what you get from that chicken breast versus that donut is very different. And I'm not here to say that the donut is worse than the chicken breast, because there is a time and a place that you should be eating a donut. Just like there's a time and a place you should be eating a chicken breast. So we're going to talk about what that time and place is. But really the power in all of this is understanding how food works and how your body works, and how the merging of the two of those can create this beautiful picture of eating really good food that you like. Any Tupac fans in the audience? All right, I saw your hand go up real quick. Awesome. You can quote me on this. You can Google it to make sure I'm right. He has a quote in one of his songs: let's change the way we eat, let's change the way we live, let's change the way we treat each other. And I think there's no better summary of the impact that food has on our lives than that. Because if you're eating food that doesn't make you feel good, does it change the way that you show up in the world? Does it change the way that you treat the people around you? It does. And if you're eating food that fills you up, that makes you feel good, maybe you have more energy. Maybe you feel differently about yourself. Maybe you respond to your kids differently, or your spouse, or your partner, or your driver, or your hostman. Food is really important. So the simple phrase, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food, I think is awesome. So now that we've set the stage around why this is so important, the next question is, well, Lisa, what am I supposed to eat? It's pretty simple. We talked about, do I like it? Or sorry, do I need it? And do I like it? Well, what do you need? Let's start with that. Whole, real food. Whole, real food. Your body knows what to do with that. So I like this simple rule. It either came from a plant or it came from an animal. Or it's made from plants or made from an animal. This is not rocket science. When I say whole, real food, I'm not saying go on a raw diet. Again, we're not choosing a specific nutritional dogma that we're subscribing to, but getting back to food that is in a more natural state. I don't think anyone would argue that a grilled chicken thigh is probably better than a compressed chicken patty that's been formed into a dinosaur shape. I'm not sure what's all in the chicken dinosaur, or where that came from, but I know where a chicken thigh came from. I know where a head of broccoli came from. I know where some almonds came from. Okay, so we're getting back to whole, real food. Came from a plant or came from an animal. I want to talk a little bit about the quality over quantity debate. So some people will say, oh gosh, at the end of the day, calories matter. Well, it really depends on your goals. So trying to say that we're blending the two into quality and quantity, but we're choosing quality first. So if you say, gosh, I usually eat McDonald's for 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. Okay, is there something better? If that's what's in your life and that's the habit that you have right now, instead of asking you to go from McDonald's all day, every day, to now you're shopping at Whole Foods and you're chopping all your vegetables and you're doing everything, is a big leap. So how do we slowly, over time, make incremental changes to get to what that end goal is? Anybody read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear? If you haven't, it's awesome. So he uses this analogy. It's like melting an ice cube. Let's say you start in a room that's 0 degrees and you want to melt an ice cube. Well, there's not a whole lot that happens between 0 and 31 degrees. But that work has to happen. In order to melt the ice cube, you have to get it over that melting point. So 0 to 31 is like, gosh, I'm doing all of this work and I don't see a whole lot of change. This ice cube hasn't done anything. It's still there, it's still frozen, it hasn't melted. But once you get to that 32, 33, then the ice cube is now starting to melt. So when we think about habit change, when we think about making food choices, all I'm asking you to do is look at what you're doing right now and figure out, how can I make the quality of this just slightly better? How can I make the quality of this slightly better? Why does it matter? Because food is more than fuel. We hear this term all the time, food is fuel. And I am not mechanically inclined. My husband will definitely agree with me on that. I know how to put gas in my car, I know how to check the oil and put air in the tires, and that's about it. But I know that my car needs more than just gas and oil and air in order to run well. And our bodies are way more complex than a car. So if we're just talking about food as fuel, then it's really a calorie debate. But this is more than that. Okay? Food is more than just fuel for energy. It's information into your cells about how to respond metabolically, what your thyroid does, what your blood glucose does, what your brain does. So to simplify it and say that food is just fuel, I think is really taking away some of the power that food has. So I put this up because sometimes we get stuck in the weeds on things that aren't really that important. So this whole campaign is built around habit change. So when we talk about what's important, what are those big dial movers? There's a principle out there, the PARETO principle. Anybody heard of that? 80-20 rule. So a lot of us get stuck on that 20%, or sorry, the 20% that really doesn't give us much feedback. So what is most important when it comes to nutrition? Oops, this is reverse. So the big dial movers when it comes to changing the way that you eat and changing your health outcomes starts with eating behaviors and lifestyle choices. So again, as a former bodybuilder, I've met some of the most fit people on the planet who are also some of the most unhealthy people on the planet. Think about that. They look aesthetically, oh my gosh, that is the healthiest person in the world. They've got single-digit body fat, and look all of their muscles. But their life, their lifestyle is not indicative of health. And that's really what we're going for, because nutrition is just one component in this comprehensive picture of what wellness is. And when we're dealing with things like cancer, when we're dealing with things like depression and behavioral health, not addressing the facets that impact those things is, I think, is a disservice to you. So lifestyle choices and eating behaviors are big dial movers. Once you have that figured out, okay, this is how I'm going to eat. This is how I'm going to structure my life. Now let's take a look a little bit more specifically about how much and the type of food that I'm eating. Once you have that figured out, then you can talk about nutrient timing. Should I eat 4 times a day? Should I eat 6 times a day? Every 3 hours? Only twice a day? Intermittent fasting? Like, what do I do? That's pretty high level. If you're not set up for success with your eating behaviors, your lifestyle choices, and the types of food that you're eating, those details, which are kind of like the sprinkling on top, aren't going to do much change. Anybody tried to build muscle before? One of the questions that I get all the time is like, oh, I got to take some creatine. Creatine has a purpose, but if you're not eating enough, creatine isn't going to do much because your muscle needs quantity in order to build. So I point this out because sometimes we get stuck in the weeds on things that aren't actually big dial movers. So once we know what to eat, well now, how do I do this? What does this look like in real life? I think it's important to call out that there are a lot of variables that impact the way in which you eat and the things that you choose. Number one being your health status. So the healthier you are, the more freedom you have. The less healthy you are, the less freedom you have. If you have high blood pressure and you're on blood pressure medication, you probably shouldn't be eating all that bacon. Just being honest. Or if you're pre-diabetic, carbs aren't really your friend right now. Highly processed carbs are not your friend, so maybe eating a donut isn't the best choice for you. The next piece is body type. We're going to dive into this a little bit more, but I think this gets overshadowed a little bit, that there's opportunity, especially when you're thinking about what this might look like within your crew. How do we feed all these different people that might have different needs? Well, understanding your body type, components might be the same, but what they look like and how you put them together will vary. Food intolerances. Anybody work with someone that after they eat a bowl of ice cream, you're like, let's leave the room? This is a very real thing. So if you have food intolerances, you probably should be avoiding those foods because it's creating some inflammation in your gut and not serving you well. Insulin sensitivity, again, this connects back to being diabetic or pre-diabetic. If you aren't super sensitive to insulin, then probably carbs are not your friend. So you need to take some steps to be more intentional about the foods that you choose. And then, of course, your training style and frequency is a big component. If I'm talking to a guy or a gal that's a power lifter, their nutrition is probably going to look very different than someone who's an endurance athlete running ultra marathons. Training style and frequency comes into play with that. And so the goal here is to find that money spot right in the middle where you're maximizing all of these facets of who you are. And it's not like, okay, I'm here and I'm stuck here forever. We change over time, and so realizing that that pendulum might swing around back and forth depending on what your goals are at that time, what your life looks like at that time. You know, I talk to recruits often, and you know, when I come into the Recruit Academy and I talk to them about their nutrition, Recruit Academy is stressful. There's a lot of work demands that put on them. So when I talk to recruits, the goal at that time is not to go on a diet. The goal at that time, get through Recruit Academy. Keep your energy levels up. Make sure that you are fueling yourself well so that you're not low on energy and you maybe sustain an injury. So depending on what your life looks like at different times might be how this pendulum moves around. So next up, we're going to talk about how to put this together in a meal. So we've got some basic components, and we're going to talk about what this looks like. So the first one that I like to point out is usually a lot of people's favorites, especially when I'm talking to a room of firefighters, and that's protein. Most of us think that protein has to do with our muscles. And while that's true, protein is actually the building block of every single cell in your body. I'm standing here basically just a big pile of protein. It also keeps our immune system strong. It keeps our reproductive system working well. We need protein. This is not debated. We need protein. So what does that look like in our diet? Well, for most of us, a serving of protein is 1 palm size. Now, I could put an egg, crack an egg, and it would fill up my palm, but it's definitely not as thick as my palm. So keep that in mind. Now, depending on all of those components of health, 1 serving might not be enough for you. And depending on how frequently you eat, 1 serving might not be enough for you. So the general recommendation for ladies is 1 palm size. For fellas, you can usually get away with 2 palm size servings. And what does that look like on your plate? Well, this is where a lot of animals come into our diet. You can notice that we also have some plant-based proteins as well, but with every plant-based protein, it also brings another macronutrient with it. So just keep that in mind. And the density of protein source will vary. For example, if I'm eating 4 ounces of fish versus 4 ounces of, wild elk, because I'm from Idaho, the amount of protein I'm going to get from that is different. But that's not a bad thing because our bodies want variety. They like variety. So I usually put here the number of legs. The more legs, the more dense it is. So obviously beans and legumes, no legs. Fish, seafood, we get some legs. And then poultry, pork, beef, bison, and of course wild game is going to be more protein dense than its commercially raised counterpart. Okay? So palm-sized serving of protein or 2 in every meal. You guys with me? Awesome. The next thing we're going to talk about is vegetables. We just need more vegetables in our life. As Americans, we typically don't get enough of these. So this is where you get to add color to your plate. You should be adding color. We need those vitamins and minerals that we get from vegetables to help our health. This is not about, oh yeah, I'm going to hit a PR because I ate a bunch of vegetables. No, you're going to protect your health because you're eating a bunch of vegetables. And it really should be 1 to 2 fistfuls in every meal. Every meal. So what does that look like at breakfast? This is where you get creative. But I will just put a caveat here that, 1 meal is not going to make or break you, but your body is responding to what it's receiving over time. So if you're like, yeah, I'm not doing vegetables at breakfast, Lisa, sorry. Well, then add some extras at lunch. Add some extras at dinner. Get creative. And what does that look like? It's just food that adds color to your plate. Pretty simple. And if you're worried, gosh, am I choosing the right vegetables? You're worrying about the wrong things. Just get the vegetables in any possible way. We got to get creative about this. One of my favorite things, any spaghetti and meatball lovers out there? Awesome, yes. That's usually a good staple. And I'm not Italian, so please don't shoot me. But usually when we do spaghetti at our house, spaghetti and meatballs, any possible way I can get some vegetables into that sauce. Great, you're shaking your head, no, You get creative, you figure out what works best for you. But I'm always adding vegetables to sauces, to soups, to scrambles, any opportunity I can, because I've got a firefighter I'm feeding, and I've got 3 kids that are super active. And they definitely would pick a brownie for breakfast over a scramble any day. So I've got to do my part to make sure that we're getting that in. And you just got to get creative. The next one I want to talk about is fat. Now, I'm a product of the 80s, so I was sold on the idea that fat is bad. Fat is not bad. It's really about the right type of fat. So heart-healthy, intentional fat is what you need to be putting into your diet. What that looks like on your plate is going to vary. But really, this is the stuff that came from plants and a little bit of animals, okay? So 1 to 2 thumb-sized servings in every meal. The thing about fat, though, is we're usually unintentional about it. So if we go back to my favorite bacon guacamole cheeseburger, and we think about this, okay, so I've got my burger, my patty, probably has some fat in it if it's going to be a good burger. It's not the super lean meat. And then maybe I put some cheese on it. It's bacon guacamole cheeseburger. So I've got bacon and I've got guacamole. If I start doing the math in my head, gosh, that is way more than 1 or 2 thumb-sized servings of fat. So really being intentional about where your fat sources come from. And when you look at your plate and you're thinking about how you're preparing this food, where is that fat coming from? Okay? So these are just some ideas. Obviously the oils, we want plant-based oils, nut-based oils, so avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, walnut. There's lots of options out there. The yolks inside your eggs are loaded with fat, but it's good stuff. That's where all the nutrients are as well. Nuts, seeds, cheeses, and dairy if you tolerate it. And then, of course, cold water fish has a lot of that good heart-healthy fat that we need. Now, I talk about protein, vegetables, and fat because that's what's essential in order to stay healthy. You know what's not essential to stay healthy? This stuff. We have to have protein. We have to have fat. There's essential amino acids. There's essential fatty acids that we have to have in our diet. We can survive without carbs, but to me, life would be really boring without some carbs in it. So how do we do this in an intentional way? If you choose to eat a lower carb diet or you choose to go keto because that makes sense for you, there's still a little bit of carbs that you're adding in. But for a lot of people, just being more mindful about the carbs that they're choosing is a great strategy. So what do smart carbs look like? Well, going back to our whole real foods, it's stuff that came from the ground. So what does that look like in real life? Oops. So if we think about this as a spectrum, down at the bottom, this is stuff that's really low density carbs. And newsflash, vegetables are carbs. They just don't have a lot of carbs in them. And then you work your way up, you've got root vegetables, potatoes. There's nothing wrong with potatoes. They're actually really nutrient dense. Again, you'll see beans and legumes in this category because they are also a carbohydrate with some extra protein in them. Fruit, potatoes, rice, pastas, and then up at the top, the sugary treats and the breads. That's really dense stuff. So you have to be smart, which is why we call them smart carb choices. Be really smart about where you plug those in. Because when we think about food, if I eat a chicken breast, that's 300 calories, and I think, gosh, I'm still hungry, and I ate another chicken breast, I'd probably be really full after that. But if I ate a donut, that's also 300 calories. It's a lot easier to eat a second donut and maybe even a third donut because it doesn't fill us up the same way. So putting food together intentionally is really where the power is. So how does this work together? Well, most of us don't eat food in isolation. We're eating food in the context of a meal. I don't see people often just kind of walking around gnawing on a chicken breast or a pepper. So sometimes that happens, but usually it's in the context of a meal. So this is where working with your family, whatever your home life looks like, and also working with your crew to put things together in an intentional way, but then also paying attention to yourself, knowing your body really well so that you can start being more intentional about your portion sizes and your food choices. So this next section, we're going to talk about body types, and I scoped out of the audience 3 people to come up and help me. So I've got Billy from Savannah, I've got Mike from Savannah, and I've got Jason from St. Louis. If you guys would just come up and stand in front of the stage for me, that would be great. We're going to talk about body types. Yeah, if you want to come right here, that would be great. And I'll put you on the end here, and you get to be right in the middle. All right. Do you notice anything that varies with these guys? Height? Okay. Anything else? Hair? Good call. Yes. Yes, we've got the spectrum here. So I bring up body types because when you think about the dynamic of a crew, there might be different body types in your crew. And so thinking like, okay, how am I going to keep myself healthy while also feeding a hungry crew? This is one strategy to explore. So we're going to talk about the different body types, and I appreciate these guys for being up here as volunteers. What to look for, and then also how to feed that body type. So this first type, we're going to call you an ectomorph, okay? So this ectomorph, you'll notice they tend to have longer limbs, a little more slender bone structure. Yeah, thanks a lot. This body type, by default, usually does not struggle with body fat. This body type usually is like, gosh, I just want to have more muscle. I want to get stronger. But being lean comes relatively easy. So this body type tends to function better on a high carb diet. Now, one way to check to see if you are this body type is if you take your wrist and then with the opposite hand, you're going to put your middle finger and your thumb together. And if those fingers touch or overlap, are you close? Oh, sorry, middle finger. Yeah, so you're pretty close. Overlap, then you are a predominantly ectomorph. Now, I will just give a caveat that there's not one person that is, I'm specifically this body type. Sometimes that happens, but not always. So this ectomorph body type, you'll see on the screen, they've got their 2 servings of protein. They've got their 2 fistful of vegetables. They have 1 thumb of fat, but notice they've got 3 servings of carbs because this body type functions well on a higher carb diet. Also, this is body type. They tend to naturally excel at endurance type activities. Any of this ringing true a little bit? Not the endurance part. Not the endurance part, okay. But usually this body type is like, I struggle putting on mass. That's typical for an ectomorph. Then at the other end of the spectrum, so if we think about a spectrum here, the other end of the spectrum, we have an endomorph. So this body type usually has a larger frame. If he tries to put his fingers together around his wrist, they won't touch. And he's shaking his head. Nope, not going to happen. Yeah. So this endomorph typically does better. You see there's still 2 palm-sized servings of protein. There's still 2 fists of vegetables. But there's 3 servings of fat and only 1 serving of carb. Because this body type usually struggles with staying as lean as they would like. So they put on body fat a little easier. But this is also the body type that you want if you're deadlifting a patient because they are powerhouses. They put on muscle relatively easy. So to function well at this body type, you might try this style of eating. Now notice, if I'm cooking for a crew that's an ectomorph and an endomorph, the ingredients are still the same, but their portion sizes are different. Okay, this is how we do this in real life. And then in the middle, we've got what's called a mesomorph. So this mesomorph is typically a blend of the 2. And so if you put your middle finger and thumb together, they're usually touching, like his are. This is what you typically see in magazines like that Athletic Build, where they have a wider shoulder and a narrower waist, where this body type is pretty, shoulders and waist are pretty straight up and down. This body type is actually a blend of eating styles. So you see the 2 palm-sized servings of protein, 2 fistful of vegetables, 2 thumbs of fat, and 2 cupped handfuls of carbs. Now again, not everyone is the epitome of this, one specific body type or the other. For example, I'll pick on my husband, which he knows that I do this. He tends to be a blend of these 2. So he's a blend of a mesomorph and an endomorph. So if he wants to get a little bit leaner, he's going to eat a little less carbs. But if he wants to get stronger and he wants to put on some mass, he's going to eat a little bit more carbs to feed that muscle development. So again, it depends on your goals. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for your help. I appreciate that. So just an example of how this might go into application. You have a question.
How about age?
Age factoring into that. That's a really good question. So it's one of the facets. So typically you're not going to need as much fuel as your 24-year-old self. But the components, so the serving sizes might look slightly different. But the components are still there because you're wanting to eat for health. You want to keep your energy up, but maybe the quantity isn't quite as aggressive as a few years before. Good question. And we have plenty of time for questions at the end, so don't worry about that. So the next question is, okay, Lisa, you talked about eating for health and eating for life. How do I eat for real? Because I still want to enjoy myself. Well, we were talking about dialing our habits to get to the end goal that we want. And it's really important that we focus on progress, not perfection. So again, my example, if you have someone who has really bad eating habits, maybe it's somebody that you work with, maybe somebody immediately comes to mind like, oh yeah, this guy or this girl should really be paying attention. The worst thing you could do is say, hey, we're going to change everything about what you're doing. It's really dramatic. It's a huge life interruption. Only in extreme situations do you need an extreme response. So we think about other types of change. If you wanted to re-landscape your yard, only in rare circumstances would you literally wipe out everything and start from dirt. You'd probably say, okay, we got a dead patch over here. Okay, we need to pull this bush out. I don't like it. These things are fine. You would build a plan for making change over time. The same is true of nutrition, but we are told that we have to give up everything. And that's not actually sustainable. So focusing on progress, not perfection, is the key. So we go back to this idea of choosing one small habit that I can stick with right now, get some reps. It's this competency loop. I need to feel confident that I can make this change, and then now I'm gonna add in some other things. And then I continue this process to get myself closer to that goal. So how do we enjoy things like, okay, Lisa said I could occasionally have a donut or a brownie. Well, I want you to remember these 3 key strategies when you're enjoying something or actually eating anything at any time. So let's say it's, evening and you guys had a great day and it's time for ice cream sundaes. Well, if you just slow down while you're eating that ice cream sundae, really pay attention. Gosh, this is delicious. I love this. Pay attention to how it tastes, pay attention to how it feels in your guts so that you can figure out when you're actually full. Because a lot of us, we blow past fullness and then we're stuffed and now we're uncomfortable. So if we just slow down, pay attention, and then stop when we're about 80% full, we can assess ourselves in that moment because that food's not going anywhere. Well, depending on your crew, it might be going away pretty fast, but there's always more where it came from. You can have ice cream another time. So if you just pay attention to when you're full, that response, because the first 3 bites are really the ones that taste the best, way better than the 30th bite. So slow down, pay attention, and stop before you get stuffed so that you're not now regretting yourself. So, all right, with this, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney for our next Eating on the Run activity.
Thank you. So we're going to have a little bit of fun looking at some nutrition facts, looking at nutrition labels, and to kind of put some of this into practice, what that looks like. So some of these dishes that I'm going to show you are some popular dishes that you might eat. This one, of course, is Olive Garden. We've got the fettuccine Alfredo with chicken. Now, I understand that you probably won't be eating on the run while you're on shift at Olive Garden, but it is a place that you might take your family or friends to. So some of the things I want to go over with you are the calories, the fat, the sodium, protein, and sugar, and carbohydrates. Can't forget about the carbohydrates. This, of course, is loaded with carbohydrates. But first thing, let's look at calories. That's quite a bit of calories, right? When you're thinking about a 2,000 calorie recommended daily allowance, and that's the recommendation. We know everyone has their own way of eating, but that's almost getting close to your 2,000 calories in that one meal. Now look at the fat. Can you read that? 100 grams. So that's not the 2 thumb size, right? There's a lot of fat in this. And look at the saturated fat, 57 grams of saturated fat, which is 285% of the recommended intake. So along with that, sodium, we've got over 1,600 milligrams of sodium in this item. I'm going to go over sodium and sugar a little bit more closely after we go through our activity here. But that is actually over half of the recommended intake. Carbohydrates, 96 grams, and then this dish doesn't have a ton of sugar in it, but you've got the carbohydrates. So I haven't even touched upon the breadsticks and the salad that you might have eaten before this meal, right? That's going to add on top of this one breadstick only, 150 calories. And you've also got 25 more grams of carbohydrates, 400 milligrams of sodium, and then the salad. So when I was looking at this nutrition information, it actually didn't say what a serving is considered at Olive Garden, so you've got to take that into factor here. But one serving of the salad adds another 150 calories, and then a bunch more sodium, 770 milligrams of sodium. So you're looking at consuming almost half of the recommended sodium intake before you even got to the meal. One thing I do want to say is that this meal that I'm talking about is the dinner portion size. Olive Garden does have lunch portions, but this is just showing you at restaurants, you're going to run in some very, very large portions, typically more than one serving, right? So another place I want to bring up, who enjoys eating at Cheesecake Factory? Just a few of you? What was that? Yeah. The reason I would bring up Cheesecake Factory is just because the nutrition facts are shocking. So when you eat at Cheesecake Factory, very huge portions, very easy to over-consume, and with one meal there, it's easy to get 1,500 to 2,000 calories, just the meal itself. That's not any appetizers, any drinks that you might consume before that, or dessert. So speaking of dessert, you're going to Cheesecake Factory, you want a piece of cheesecake, right? What do you think is the average calorie count for a cheesecake there? Heard 1,600? 3,500? 2,000? It's actually the average is 1,000 calories or over. There was one on the menu when I was looking that was under 1,000 calories, and that was 850 calories. So you're not really saving a whole lot there. I'm not saying that you can't indulge and enjoy some of these things, but I just want you to keep in mind, typically when you're eating out at restaurants, they're going to be very, very large portions. You're going to have a ton of sodium and probably a lot of fat, and depending on the meal that you're choosing. This just kind of puts into perspective of what you're eating. So let's take a look at a little bit healthier option. This is the Olive Garden pasta with marinara sauce, and I added in some grilled chicken on the side there. You can see the nutrition facts with the grilled chicken to add some protein. And this is just a little bit more balanced meal option that's available. Yes, there are still more carbohydrates, so if you're watching your carbohydrates, just try to not eat as many at your other meals. But you're still going to have some more sodium, but it's not quite as crazy as the other sodium of the other dish. So next, this might be a place that you visit when you're eating on the run, Chipotle. The one on the left is the Chipotle chicken burrito with guacamole, sour cream, cheese, rice, and beans. And then the little bit healthier option on the right you're making the burrito into a bowl. So you're adding your lettuce, and then it doesn't have cheese, sour cream, or beans. So first off, can you see the sodium in the one on the left? 2,000 milligrams. I'll talk more in detail in the next slide, but just a hint, 2,300 milligrams is the limit for the day. So you're getting it right there in that one meal. Calories of over 1,000, and then we've got the fat again in this meal. 59 grams, you've got your saturated fat. Typically, you want 10% or less of your daily intake coming from saturated fat. So what I did, and one more thing I wanted you to look at is the protein. 46 grams in that meal, which fine if you're looking to eat more protein, but typically in one meal our body can only digest up to 30 grams, and then the rest is going to be stored as fat for later. The one on the right, what I did here was take out the cheese and the sour cream, which is more of where the saturated fats are coming from. It still has the guacamole in it, so that's why the fat count is a little bit higher. But as Lisa mentioned earlier, that's eating more with intention, and the guacamole is some healthy fats in there. There probably is a little bit more than 2 thumbs worth. But this is just an example of some items that you can look at by changing it up and making it a little bit healthier. So here's our sodium slide. The average American consumes 3,400 milligrams of sodium per day, and that's almost 50% more than what is recommended. The recommended is 2,300 milligrams So that's about 1 teaspoon. So you can see the picture here, half of a tablespoon, just to give you an idea of what that looks like when you're consuming that much sodium. And then the 1 teaspoon, the recommendation is 2,300 milligrams. So too much sodium in the diet can lead to high blood pressure, which is the silent killer, if you've heard of that. Silent killer, it's called that because typically there's no symptoms that occur with high blood pressure until it's a little too late, when it turns into hardening of the arteries and heart disease. And then high blood pressure, of course, is the leading cause of heart disease and stroke. So those who are at risk for heart disease, and anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or chronic kidney disease, the sodium limit is a little bit lower, and it's at 1,500 milligrams per day. Let's look at sugar. So how much sugar do you think the average American consumes? Think in teaspoons. Any guesses? 6? That's actually thinking low. Oh, 3 packets of sugar in the coffee. Well, we're going to talk to you about sugar. I'm just kidding. 17 teaspoons is actually what's average. And that's not counting sugars that occur naturally in fruits or dairy products. So this is more thinking about added sugar. Now, added sugar lurks in nearly 70% of packaged food. It's found in breads. It's found in health foods, snacks, yogurts, most breakfast foods, and sauces. So I say health foods in quotes because if you go and look at some of the health bars or protein shakes that are out there on the shelf, what's it filled with? A lot of them. Sugar, lots of ingredients that you can't pronounce. Typically, if you see a nutrition label that has lots and lots of ingredients with names you can't pronounce, it's most likely not something that you want to be consuming on a daily basis. So how much sugar should we be consuming? What is recommended? The FDA recommends no more than 10% of our calories per day, which is equal to about 12 teaspoons or 200 calories. Now this chart on the right, that is from the American Heart Association. They have a little bit lower recommendations. You can see for men, it's 9 teaspoons, 36 grams, or 150 calories. For women, it's 6 teaspoons, 25 grams, or 100 calories. So too much added sugar is linked to weight gain, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. Another thing that's important to watch out for, which typically if you see some of these words like gluten-free, natural flavors, those are products that probably have a lot more sugar added to them because it's trying to make it taste good. So you just want to watch out for some of those marketing words. It's not necessarily healthy when they show up on the package. Now to put this into perspective, the top 4 items here at the top of this chart are exceeding the recommended daily allowance of 12 teaspoons. If you're going by American Heart Association recommendations, that's even lower. So just to point out, none of you drink Rockstar, Monster energy drinks, right? I'm kidding, but if you are, this is what you're drinking. 19.5 teaspoons of sugar. We've got the Mountain Dew in the middle, 16.5 teaspoons. Monster drink, over 13 teaspoons. And then let's just take a look at common product like Coke. You're over 8 teaspoons in that. Red Bull, 6.8 teaspoons. And then Capri Sun, which some people might think is a pretty healthy drink. You're at 6 teaspoons right there drinking that. What does this look like? Here's a picture. This is just a visualization of what sugar looks like in some of the popular items like chocolate milk, orange juice, Red Bull, tea, and Coke. So if you're drinking a Coke on the end there, that's actually how much sugar you're consuming. Looks pretty gross when you put it in that perspective, right? You might want to stick to the water. Oops. Okay, so here's some tips for eating healthy when eating out. You want to consider your drink. We haven't even touched upon alcohol here. That could be a whole topic in itself. But alcohol, soda, sweet tea adds those extra calories and sugar. When you're thinking about a serving of alcohol, it's actually not that much. One beer, one serving is 12 ounces. A glass of wine is only 5 ounces. So putting that into perspective, you're really consuming a lot if you have like 2 to 3 beers or 2 glasses of wine. It's also adding a lot more sugar to your diet. We're not suggesting that you start drinking if you don't drink alcohol, but the recommendation is for men 1 to 2 servings per day, and for women 1 serving per day. That's only if you do consume alcohol. Split the main meal, so don't feel like, or ask for a box right away when you're getting to the restaurant. That's just, you saw the portion sizes. If you know you're going to a restaurant, you know it's going to be a large portion, ask for a box right away. Put half of it away and eat intuitively. Ditch the clean plate mentality. I saw somebody was from Iowa. I saw the herky on your sweatshirt. I feel like in Iowa, you kind of grow up with that clean your plate mentality. So when you don't have to eat everything on your plate. Slow down while you're eating, be more mindful, and you might want to use the hunger fullness scale. So what is that? That's a scale of 1 to 10. 1 would be you're feeling famished and irritable, hangry. You hear that word a lot now. 10, you're feeling overstuffed, maybe even sick. So what you want to think of when you're at a 3, that's when you're hungry and ready to eat. And you want to stop at a 6. That's when you're satisfied and you're no longer hungry. It takes about 20 minutes for our mind to recognize and for our body to digest our food and realize that we're actually full. Pass on the buffet. When you go to buffets, you're likely to overeat. It's full of sodium, probably full of sugar, and you're most likely going to fill up on less nutrient-dense foods. Don't be afraid to ask how something is made. If you have food intolerances or sensitivities and you know where you're going ahead of time, check out that menu and be your own health advocate. Don't be afraid to ask for your vegetables with no butter or no oil. You can add some seasoning to it. Maybe put your dressing on the side or ask for grilled versus fried foods. And be your own health advocate as I suggested. Just being mindful, knowing what you're going to be putting on your plate, adding those vegetables into each meal. So how is the IAFF supporting you with this nutrition campaign? The IAFF believes that we need to expand the Wellness Fitness Initiative to include a more holistic approach, to include but not only behavioral health, nutrition, sleep, fitness, and annual exams. So the IAFF believes that providing firefighters with proper tools, they can be the front line in cancer reduction. Think about this. You've trained on cancer prevention tactics, such as wearing full turnout gear with your SCBA, performing on-scene gross decontamination, cleaning your body and gear to remove those contaminants, or even using diesel exhaust systems in the bay at the station, to name a few. Obviously, those are very important actions to take. You're focusing on those external factors. But cancer prevention needs to start before the firefighter actually comes to work. That's very important. Nutrition needs to be a priority. You think about all of these external factors that you spend time trying to control, but how often do you think about what you're putting directly into your body? Think about how many times you eat each day. Every time you eat is an opportunity to make a healthy choice. So our campaign has 5 objectives. Bringing awareness to the importance of nutrition and its role in overall health status. Educating members around quality dietary habits, both at home and on duty. Engaging members in making sound dietary changes that can be sustained for long term. Participating in slow, consistent lifestyle change, like Lisa mentioned. You don't want to change everything at once. Just doing small behavioral changes each day is going to add up to long-term success in the long run. And finally, generate buy-in for changes to the IAFF-sponsored nutrition program, which we're also talking about the Peer Fitness Trainer program, the Wellness Fitness Initiative, and updating nutrition recommendations within those. So let's think about the normalization of deviance concept. That's the unacceptable practice of standards becoming acceptable. And when it comes to behavioral changes, behavior continues to be repeated without something bad happening. So let's just say we have a firefighter who is a size 34 pant size. He's feeling pretty good. He's at the start of his career. He's exercising. He feels like his diet is pretty good, and he's good with that. That's his norm. So a year goes by, and all of a sudden, this firefighter doesn't have as much time for exercise. Maybe his regular diet is starting to incorporate a little bit more less nutrient-dense foods. And all of a sudden, he's a size 36 pant size. Well, I guess that's okay. That's my new norm. So the behavior continues and goes on for another year, and then all of a sudden, this firefighter has a size 38 pant size. This becomes the new norm. And so one day, health issues start to occur, which then might turn into chronic disease. So trying to put this normalization of deviance concept into practice with something you do daily, think about something you do when you come into the shift each day. Checking your SCBA. You have your checklist, checking valves, checking the regulator, making sure you're going over everything properly. So you continue to do this as you go on years and years into the service. You're kind of on autopilot. So maybe steps get missed. We talk about this a lot in the Fireground Survival Program, this normalization of deviance concept. All of a sudden, you're on autopilot and maybe you're missing some steps and it becomes the norm. We don't want this. With nutrition, going back to nutrition, we want to make sure that turn some of these negative behaviors into positive behaviors. So this nutrition campaign, we want to go over it in more detail and what does that really entail? And a little bit of background on it as well. So it was identified at the last Wellness Fitness Initiative Task Force meeting. There was a great need for more nutrition programming, more education for our members. This led to the evaluation of the current offerings available to our members. One of those, Fit to Survive, which was a very great program for a while. Recommendations made through the WFI and the PFT program. But we noticed that there's multiple opportunities for increased engagement and nutrition implementation. These come in the form of awareness, education, and participation in new strategies. Focus on the ultimate goal of improving quality of life for our members. This campaign is funded by the Fire Prevention and Safety Grant. And it was created to bring awareness of the importance of nutrition and its role it plays in firefighter health. So as I mentioned earlier, we want to we might be repeating some of these things, but we really want you to get a concept and get a grasp of why this is so important. The campaign will engage you in creating and maintaining healthy eating habits that support your training, your work demands, fitness goals, and long-term health. So what has been created is a landing page on the IAFF website. You can see the address here. It's iaff.org/nutrition. And there's a bunch of resources on there. So when you go to the home page right now, you're going to see information about the campaign. We have a handout that we pass out. Those of you who are viewing at home or at the station, check out the website, and you'll see some information about the campaign, the challenge. Lisa is going to talk about the challenge in a minute and what all that entails. We have some resources on there right now. We meant to pass this out before the beginning of the presentation, but we weren't sure where they are. But please, before you leave, in the back of the room, we have a firefighter nutrition guide. That guide is now available on our website as well to download. It'd be something that would be great to print out and put at the fire station. Lisa has created some videos with some nutrition tips. They're short videos, so that's great to show at the station as well. And then we are going to continue to populate our website with more resources. So when you get your firefighter nutrition guide, you'll notice there's some great information. There's portion control information. We haven't touched much on hydration today, but there's some information about hydration in there. And we want to create all of these resources to be available to download to be passed out, or some of them might even be good to hang up at the station. And then we also have some infographics that we would love for you to share on social media. So with that, Lisa is going to talk some more about this exciting, fun challenge that we have coming up starting February 1st.
I'll just give a little plug to that firefighter nutrition guide. You know, people are always wondering, gosh, what can I do now? Where can I start? And having this resource that was put together that's research-based, is focusing on habit change, is a great place to direct people, because we realize you're here because you're invested in this. This is important to you. But there might be other people that are in your department, at your station, that maybe just need a little more support, and so that's really the intention behind this guide. So to kick this off, we thought, what better way to launch our nutrition campaign than to do a challenge. Now the thing about this challenge, it's not like a typical, you know, shredded in 6 weeks challenge. It's actually 30 days of real food challenge. So just like we were talking before about food choices, elevating your game, this is just getting people to transition to thinking about how they can incorporate more whole, real foods into their diet. Now with any challenge, most people are like, okay, tell me what the rules are. We do have some parameters around what that means, what that looks like. We've got a basic level. And then if you're one of those individuals who's like, yeah, I've been doing this for a while, I feel pretty good, there's an advanced track. So if you want to challenge yourself a little bit more. I've done this challenge for a variety of different groups, and there was a department back in Idaho that did this, and one of the guys pointed out to me, he said, you know, I've been wanting to eat differently. This gave me an out to say, sorry, we're not doing Pizza Fridays, because I wanted to be healthier, and this was an opportunity for me to say, hey, if we do this, maybe we could do something different when we're working on Fridays instead of hitting the local pizza buffet. So great opportunity to facilitate conversation and to maybe start looking at things differently. So again, it's a 30-day challenge, and February, we know this, doesn't have 30 days in it, so it actually goes into the 1st of March, because there are 29 days this year in February. So we also have a private Facebook group. So you can sign up for the challenge using the link that's on the IAFF website, and then we also have a private Facebook group. What you can expect from this challenge: there are weekly emails that will be sent out to all the participants, and that weekly email is just, hey, here's some great information, here's some resources if you're wondering what to eat. We will also be posting inside the Facebook group every day, Monday through Friday. I will be going live every Friday. I'll have a quick little teaching topic, but then that's also where I will be answering your questions. So people in the Facebook group, they can submit their questions. We'll be doing a Q&A session. And really the private Facebook group is about accountability, but also community. Because we're talking to fire departments, we're talking to firefighters all over the US and Canada. So let's bring everybody together and let's support each other through this, because no one else understands the unique culture better than other firefighters. So really it's an opportunity to share what's working well for you, maybe some struggles, and then someone else can share, hey, I was struggling with this, and this is how I overcame it. And then we do invite you, because we recognize that you are only a part of the bigger puzzle. Your support staff, so spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, people that are in your life, if they want to join you in on this, we invite them, because that's part of the community that we're here to serve. As a spouse, I want to do everything I can to support my husband, and I'm sure you have people in your life that want to support you as well. So even though the phrase is misery loves company, it's not going to be miserable. It's going to be awesome. So I hope you guys will join us. Make sure that you check your email. We sent a blast email about signing up for the challenge. You can also go to iaff.org/nutrition and sign up for the challenge there, and then send that information to whomever you invite to join you along in the process. And then you'll get information on how to join the private Facebook group. So we're really excited to launch this. We have over 100 people in the private Facebook group, and I think over 150 that have already signed up for the challenge. So it's gaining some momentum, and we're excited to continue. So with that, just a quick summary. So today we introduced this real life approach to eating. It's eating for health, it's eating for life, and it's eating for real. And this is where you really take initiative to focus on quality eating habits in order to see big change. We definitely want to prevent and even reverse chronic diseases that you're at risk for with your life in the fire service. We want to establish foundational habits that serve you well both on duty and at home, and there might be some variation between the two. We also want to encourage you to make it a lifestyle. This is not a quick fix, this is not a fad, but really this is how lifestyle change happens. And then a big thing, we want you to understand what sensible portions look like and be mindful of eating, whether it is whole real food or if it's one of those times that you're choosing to indulge. Really that mindful eating practice is a lifelong skill. And then of course, small changes over time lead to big benefits. Courtney, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Just the action, the action step, if we can go to the next slide. What can you do now? Like we mentioned, visit our website. If you have people who are in your station that are already excited about fitness and wellness and nutrition, they can be an early adopter, they can be someone that you look up to, so get them involved if they don't know about this new campaign, and then join the 30-day Whole Food Challenge. Please check out the resources available on our website as well, and we just want you to start spreading the word around your department. And with that, we can take some questions. If you have some questions, we just ask that you come up to the microphone so people who are viewing online can hear as well.
And I'll just put one last plug in. So this challenge that's starting February 1st is the first of many challenges that we'll be launching throughout this year. But this is just to get kind of your feet wet, getting you accustomed to that. So any questions that you guys have on any aspect of the nutrition that we've covered, about the challenge?
On the challenge from the private group, you gonna put some recipe or just to help people, or maybe what's the group gonna do?
So the question was on the private Facebook group, what's the point of that? And really it's about bringing together for community support. So there'll be posts on a weekly basis. There'll be kind of an accountability check-in, like, hey, are you still in it? We hope you are. What are you struggling with? What's working well for you? And then once a week, every Friday afternoon, I'll be going live to answer questions and to do a little bit of teaching, but really to answer questions for the people that are in that community.
Are we gonna put some recipe?
Yes, we will definitely. So his question was, are we going to add recipes? Yep, so we do have it queued up that we'll have some recipes, we'll have some resources, some tips on a regular basis in order to help you guys be successful in that challenge. All right, do you have a question?
Adam Van Group in LA City Fire, Local 112. So yeah, that was going to be one of my questions as well. Is like from Los Angeles City, we just recently came up with a wellness bonus, which is encouraging our members to get healthy. And so one of the ways we're trying to do that is by promoting healthy eating at the station. So I think this is a great start for that. We've also been making some posters, so that might be a good thing to get on the website, download some posters to encourage that. We have like some of the cancer posters, but we've also been saying, hey, not only does keep your turnouts out of the kitchen, but also keep fatty foods out of the kitchen. And so yeah, it'd be nice to see maybe some download for posters and some good healthy lean and green recipes on there would be good. So
That's awesome. I'm glad you bring that up because we do have some infographics that have, they're really user-friendly and they're visually appealing. So in the resources section, we've got some PDFs that you could download and easily turn them into a poster. So instead of just, standard print format, you can make them a little bit larger and post them on the cabinet, put them on a bulletin board. We've got lots of infographics and you can kind of pick and choose what you think will speak to your crew and to your departments, but we're definitely building out that resource library.
perfect. Yeah, and I think these challenges would be good for station to station. Like pretty much my whole station has gone lean and green now, so we're not cooking with fatty foods anymore. So we're really trying to get our other stations on board to do that.
Good for you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you. Any other questions?
Didn't specifically address like artificial sweeteners and caffeine content. A couple of things that like the fire service are sleep deprivation and alternatives sugar. I was just wondering if you had any information. Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay.
If there's additional content that
Yeah, so the question was, what about artificial sweeteners and even caffeine consumption? Courtney, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So we are going to be creating some separate resource pages, like 1 or 2 handouts, and that's definitely one that would be great to include, talking about added sugars and artificial sweeteners. And yes, artificial sweeteners is definitely a topic that needs to be talked about, because the artificial sweeteners can have a negative effect on our body. Some people think that they can drink diet soda just because it doesn't have any of the calories. But just for example, I know that artificial sweeteners makes me have a headache, or sometimes I'll get a migraine from it. So there are some health issues that have come up with the artificial sweeteners, and there's some research that backs this as well. So I think that is a very important topic that we will cover and create a resource around.
Yeah, and I'll just give a little plug. Dr. Panda out of the Salk Institute is doing some federally funded research around sleep and shift workers, predominantly firefighters. I think he's partnered with San Diego Fire. So he's looking at the impact that nutrition and caffeine have on our sleep cycles. Because, you know, when we talk about wellness, this comprehensive idea, it's almost like a spider web, and nothing is siloed. So it's all interconnected. So he's a great resource to look into. I think his recommendation is no caffeine after 1 or 2 p.m. and there's a lot of research to support that. But it's tough when you're, you know, responding to calls at 2 a.m. So how do you keep yourself awake? I will do just say a little addition about artificial sweeteners. As Courtney mentioned, no, they don't have any caloric content, but what we're learning about artificial sweeteners in particular is they cause this major disruption in your gut. And we know that our immune systems are actually built in our gut. So if you've got gut dysbiosis, that can lead to a whole host of downstream issues. So it's not that artificial sweeteners are harmless simply because they don't have calories in them. It's just a different impact. So that's something to be mindful of.
And it's kind of going back to what I talked about with going with new norms. If someone is going from, let's say, 3 Cokes one day down to 2 Coke, maybe they switch to diet, and hopefully with the intentions of going off of the soda completely, but they might not feel the effects of the diet soda, the fake sugars at first, but then over time, that's something that will eventually disrupt your gut and lead to other health issues.
I hope that answered your question. Awesome. Yeah, you had a question.
I was also wondering if you can comment on plant-based proteins versus animal, and we have several members that have switched to that, and would there be some resources to help us find the proper plant-based proteins?
Yeah, so I think that's a really hot topic right now, and I think it's important to point out that we've been really intentional about not subscribing to a specific dogma, whether you're paleo or carnivore or vegan. Putting you in the driver's seat to decide what's best for you, and just helping people understand you need protein. Where that protein comes from is up to you. And plant-based protein looks different than animal-based protein. You get a different nutrient profile from that. You can still be intentional about it, and there's some incredible resources. I think it's Dr. Ornish has a lot of research around the benefits of plant-based diet in terms of heart health. But there's also other experts that say, hey, we also need animal-based protein. And for us to take a position to say everybody needs to do this one thing, really it depends on what your preference is. So what I like to remind people is, if you enjoy eating animal-based protein and it fits well in your lifestyle in a sustainable way, then being intentional about that and elevating the quality of those ingredients is where you can start. If that doesn't make sense for you, and you know you could live with or without animal-based protein, and you want to try going plant-based, going fully vegan or vegetarian, I say do it. Look at it as an experiment, see how it goes. Pay attention to how your body responds. Especially, you know, a couple weeks in you'll feel a certain way, but then a month later, 2 months later, how are you feeling? The key with going plant-based, solely plant-based, is really being intentional about those protein sources. So quinoa, lentils, tempeh, beans, legumes, but just knowing that with those plant-based sources, you're also getting some other things that come with it.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to?
Just we will highlight some different ways of eating just to put some of that information out there, but like Lisa said, we won't be focusing in on one central way of eating, but just an example of how you can bring that to your station is maybe just, hey, this week or tonight we're going to do a vegetarian meal, or just like meatless Mondays, things like that. But when you're also thinking about the vegetarian plant-based proteins and going vegetarian or vegan, you want to think about not going to processed stuff, because I've seen a lot of athletes that have gone that route, but they can't seem to get enough protein in them unless they're going to more processed food. So that's just one thing I caution is with eating with intention, make sure you're reading the ingredients, because I know there are a lot of soy plant-based products out there replacing meats, but there's also a lot of other stuff that's added into it.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mike. I'm from Local 29 in Spokane,
Hi.
right next door to Idaho.
Yes.
Thank you for doing this presentation. I think it's well needed in the firefighting industry, but I do a lot of work with the cancer awareness and prevention in Spokane, and part of that is nutrition. And one thing I didn't hear today was, particularly related to vegetables, are organic foods, pesticides application, things like that, where we are ingesting pesticides. And the same with meats like cattle and pork, et cetera, hormone ingestion, things like that. So I didn't hear you guys talk much about that today,
I can take that.
the organic part.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to organic, it's the Environmental Working Group. It's a website that provides the Dirty Dozen. So that's, when you're thinking, it can get expensive. So when you're thinking of buying your fruits and vegetables, you don't have to buy them all organic, but the ones that you want to pay attention to are the ones that are on the Dirty Dozen list. And the Dirty Dozen list is all of those fruits and vegetables that have more pesticides or chemicals that have been added to them. So I know that berries are on that list, any of the green leafy vegetables with the lettuce, spinach, kale. And then they also have the Clean 15. So that's the list if you're not wanting to go all organic. You can look at these 15 vegetables, fruits and vegetables, and save a little bit money by buying those maybe not organic. Do you want to add anything?
I'll just say if you're gonna Google Dirty Dozen, make sure you put EWG.
Yeah. You want to get it from that source.
And I will also say, just kind of touching on quality sourced meat. Not all of us have that luxury. I live in an agricultural state, so in Idaho, it's easier to find sustainably sourced meat. So you have to figure out what makes sense for you. I'm also feeding a family of 5, so it's not realistic for me to buy everything organic. So using the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 group, when it comes down to it, if you're eating more plants than processed food, then you're pushing yourself in a better direction versus, if it's not organic, I can't eat it. So when we think about cascading behaviors, if you're eating more whole real foods, and then the next step is to elevate the quality of those foods. Okay, what can I buy that's sustainable, that is organic? How can I find quality sourced meat versus conventionally raised beef and chicken and pork? That's kind of the spectrum that you're working on. At the end of the day, if you eat broccoli from the grocery store versus an organically labeled, processed bar, the broccoli is going to be better, even if it's not organic. So just something to keep in mind, that there's balance in there, and you just have to figure out what works for you. But great question, and it's a valid concern. Any other questions? Well, I know Courtney and I are going to stick around after this, so if you have individual questions and you want to come up and chat with us, we are available. The last thing I will say is we definitely want your feedback on this presentation, so make sure you use the app for the conference today to evaluate this presentation. They are doing a drawing for an Apple Watch for all the participants that provide feedback, so don't forget to give us your feedback. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the challenge.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming today.